complex illness cannot be simplified. Why do I say that it is a highly complex illness? Because it is highly personal, as I have previously stated, and therefore practically unique to each person. It's both a brain and a mind matter. It affects and is affected by both the mental and the physical. It can also engage the spiritual and the metaphysical. So it is hugely complex. Now, we must guard against simplifying it into a list of tick boxes. Even these can be useful as diagnostic tools, of course, I acknowledge that. But oversimplification far too often leads to wrong diagnosis or even lack of diagnosis altogether. So for every typical quote-unquote bipolar disorder case, there are dozens of untypical cases, and I'm one of them. I mean, even my medical treatment doesn't fit conventional boxes. Fortunately for me, my psychiatrist doesn't believe in, and I quote him, pushing the treatment box onto the patient. God bless him for that. So I'm fortunate there. The ability to, in fact, interestingly enough, the ability to embrace complexity is one of the signs of good mental health. So we shouldn't try and oversimplify it. We can, however, and this is what Batty and I have been working on, it can be reduced. We can reduce it, but in the same sense as a sauce can be reduced in cooking to bring out the essence of its unique flavor. Each bipolar disorder story is unique and therefore a one-off clinical recipe all unto itself. I have to say that psychiatrists do not have an easy job. Each sufferer is ultimately responsible for discovering and managing that unique recipe. The WRAP initiative, which is the Wellness Recovery Action Plan initiative, supports that individual responsibility. And on the site, you'll see that it is mentioned also elsewhere. And to me, a good psychiatrist is like a great chef, a passionate experimenter with a love for mental flavors. The next point really I want to make is that there is no doubt that bipolar disorder is disabling. There are days when what I call my concrete body, there is a medical term for it, but I always forget it, doesn't even allow me to get out of bed. I cannot physically move. I feel like I'm paralyzed in a body that weighs a ton. Now, there are days when I want to sleep all the time, and there are nights when I don't even bother to go to bed because I'm not going to sleep a wink, even with the knockout effect of my evening medication. There are days when my brain doesn't function very well and I get confused and accident prone. There are days when my concentration is very poor and my memory even worse. There are days where when I feel disabled. Having said that, I am not disabled. Yes, there are days which are really awful, but there are days when everything functions really well. There may be a BPD ghost in my machine, but the machine itself is not broken. It just slows down a lot or speeds up too much sometime. So mentally ill patients are not mentally disabled. They are sick, just as someone with a broken leg is not a paraplegic. And mental ill patients do not have learning difficulties. They have functioning difficulties. Now, I do acknowledge that people with learning difficulties can also suffer from a mental illness, but the two are separate things. BPD sufferers can be high-functioning individuals who have functioned too well, too much, and for too long in the past, in fact. Mental disability is permanent. Mental illness is temporary, even if it is chronic, because it fluctuates. I think it's most important in people's mind that we do not put mental disability, learning difficulties, and mental illness in the same bag. They can overlap, but they are essentially very different things, and people in those groups have very different needs. Now, I'm certainly not advocating with my title that we laugh at mental illness. And you will see from the title that when a word doesn't exist, I have no compunction at all. And I create it. I like the word cretinous. It sounds good to me. So we do not laugh at people with cancer. So why would we laugh at people with a mental illness? It's just simply unacceptable and cruel. Some of the behavior exhibited by people who are mentally ill can be funny, but it is for them to laugh at themselves, not for anybody else to mock them. Often people laugh because they're scared, and mocking mentally ill people keeps mental illness at a safe emotional distance. You know, if you point your finger at something, there's at least the length of your arm between that thing and yourself, and that makes you feel safe. But it's not a good way of doing it. In fact, mental illness may not affect us all, but mental health is for everybody. And in a way, as I've said many times before, mental illness is too devastatingly serious not to laugh with it. And as the title says here, laughing with mental illness has no nasty side effects. Laughter is cheap medicine, which is great. Le rire est le propre de l'homme. Laughter makes a man, wrote Rabelais, the great French Renaissance humanist and writer, and boy, do I agree with him. When we laugh together, we show our humanity. When we laugh at ourselves, we show our humility. Laughter is a great diffuser of ignorance and fear. And also, being communicative, laughter is a disease that is well worth catching. So, laughter to me is part of dealing, healing, living with a mental illness. Now, I'm saying this now about the system for the benefit of all those brave souls who work in mental health support services, medical and non-medical alike. Many of these people deserve medals. In spite of some pockets of excellence, overall, our mental health support system is inadequate, let's face it, because, one, it is underfunded, and two, it is disorganized and disconnected, and there is not enough joined-up thinking and joined-up delivery going on. From the service user point of view, it can be frustrating and totally disorienting. If you're already disoriented and confused, the system finishes you off. From the service provider's point of view, it can be overwhelming and demoralizing, and I see a lot of that. And it breaks my heart, really. And yet, I have personally experienced the magic of individual investment, even from within an underfunded system. And my intention is not to force service providers to work themselves to death to compensate for the system's inadequacies. Too many of them do that already. My intention is to help individuals within the system become aware of the power of their personal caring. An interaction with a mentally ill patient does not need to be lengthy or costly to have a positive healing effect. Attitude is the mind's paintbrush. It can color any situation.